All right, so the time has come to write our actual assertion to validate that the component is working as expected. So what we want to do in this lesson is check that a certain message is on the screen for the user. That message, of course, is being set right here after the user is in login mode and provides a valid email and a valid password. We update the state to display this message, "You are now logged in," which we render below. And once again, thinking back to the principles of React Testing Library, we don't care about things like component state. We don't care that this property is called message and that it's being set right here. The user visiting our website has no clue about React or any of these JavaScript details. All we care about is the user experience, and that is what the user sees. So we are displaying the message right here, and that's basically all we need to check for, that the message is on the screen. So there's a convenient helper method, or a query method to be more specific, on the screen object called getByText. What that is going to do is search for any element within the UI, within the DOM, that has the given text. Now, once again, we don't want to query for a specific element because that makes our tests brittle. So for example, here we have our paragraph tag right here. And in other testing libraries, we could, for example, query directly for a paragraph tag. But the problem with that test is it's not as resilient to change, because tomorrow, if, for example, we change this P to a div, then our test that is specifically checking for a P tag will fail, right? So again, the user doesn't care about whether we have a paragraph or a div. The user cares about the text that we show on screen and what it communicates, and that's what we want to test for. So getByText, once again, is an example of a method that doesn't care about the implementation. It cares about the behavior. It just needs something in the DOM to exist that's going to have a piece of text. And of course, the text we want to look for is, "You are now logged in." So once again, the get methods expect just one occurrence, one match. So the fact that our test isn't failing means that our React Testing Library has found some text of this exact value in our interface. So what I'm going to do is save this to a constant called success message. And this, again, is not going to be a basic string. It is an actual DOM node. So if I output a success message, we're going to see it is an actual HTML node. If I scroll to the top, you can see it is an HTML paragraph element, but it doesn't have to be, right? Because tomorrow it can be a div or an LI. It doesn't matter. The point is that the test has found something on our screen with the text "You are now logged in." Then what I'm going to validate is that this is indeed in the document. Technically, this is already doing that because simply by the virtue of the test not failing, that means that React Testing Library has found that thing. But I do want to add an explicit assertion using our just expect syntax. So right here, I'm going to say expect. I'm going to provide my success message, which again is just an actual HTML element, a DOM node. And then there is a special assertion that we now have available to us from React Testing Library, and that is called "to be in the document." And remember, for the purposes of testing, our document is basically our web page rendering our component. In this case, the single component that we provide right here to the render function. So this is going to be our app component rendering in our web browser, our simulated web browser, our simulated document, and we're just verifying that this success message is somewhere in the document, basically validating that this node of HTML paragraph element is found within the document. Once again, we kind of already did this on line 22 simply by finding it, but this is an actual assertion from the just side of things. And when I save this, you can see it's going to pass, which means the test will validate that that DOM node exists within the document. So once again, we can sort of test this a couple of different ways. Even now, this is the test that we ultimately want to keep because this is simulating the user experience. But one way that we can show that this test is testing the right thing is by triggering an intentional failure. So for example, if I go to this text right here, this is where we are clicking the button, which is actually triggering the form, right? And the submission, which updates the message. So if we never click the button, then this text should not be on the screen yet. So if I comment this out, at this point, you're going to see that the test will fail because React Testing Library is not going to be able to successfully submit by successfully clicking the button. right? So you can see it says unable to find an element with the text you are now logged in. That's because the text message is not present because the form did not submit properly in our handler because we don't have the condition met of having clicked the button, right? So this goes to show that we need all of these steps, all of these user steps in order to test the component. And that is intentional, right? We are walking through the complete flow that the user will walk through in real life. We are finding a text box with a given label of email address where the user can type in their email. We're finding a input with a label of password where the user can provide their password. Then we have to click the button like so. So I'm going to comment this back in. And then we expect this text to be in the document and exactly this text, right? So this is our first full test for React Testing Library, and hopefully it's demonstrated how this library tries to simulate a real-world environment within our JavaScript node ecosystem, right? This is actually very different from how other libraries like Enzyme, which we talked about earlier, tested React. Enzyme was a lot more focused on components and React internals. So we could actually do things like ask the component for its current state and validate that a certain state property was of a given value, right? And that was testing a little bit too much for us as developers, rather than turning the focus to the user and how they are experiencing the app, which again is the most important thing at the end of the day, right? We want to make sure that the code does what it's supposed to do and deliver the value that it's supposed to deliver. And so React Testing Library says, test it as close as possible to the real world, just like how the user will interact with it. And that's exactly what we're doing with this test. So if this syntax and these methods are still a little bit new, don't worry. We're going to write a couple more tests in the upcoming lessons. We also have to test the form as a reminder in the registration mode and a whole bunch of other things. So don't worry. We're going to practice more with this syntax starting in the next lesson, and I will see you there.